The reason you miss someone more after seeing them isn't that you're too attached. It's that seeing them reactivates something that was starting to go dormant. And now your brain has to grieve the distance all over again from square one. Most people think spending time with someone they miss will help, like it'll fill the tank and make the separation easier. So they see them, have a good time, and then feel 10 times worse than before. That's confusing because the logic should work. You saw them, you got your fix, you should feel better. But you don't. You feel like you ripped open something that was starting to heal. Here's what's actually happening. Before you see someone, you're missing a memory. You're missing the idea of them, the abstraction of the connection. Your brain is adapting to their absence in the background, slowly adjusting to a reality where they're not around. It's not pleasant, but it's manageable because the feeling is kind of blurry. You miss them, sure, but in a generalized, distant way. Then you see them, and suddenly you're not missing the idea anymore. You're missing the actual person. The way they laugh at something specific, the exact tone of their voice when they're telling a story, the particular feeling of being around them. All of that comes back in high definition. Your brain goes from missing something abstract to missing something incredibly concrete and specific. And that specificity makes the absence so much sharper. I remember noticing this with a friend I only saw a few times a year. We'd make plans, I'd look forward to it, we'd hang out, and it would be great. Then I'd drive home and feel completely hollowed out. Like I'd just made the missing worse. For a while, I thought maybe that meant I shouldn't see him as much, that the pain afterward wasn't worth it. But that didn't make sense either, because the time we spent together was genuinely good. It wasn't bittersweet or awkward, it was just good. So why did I feel worse? The thing I didn't understand then is that seeing him wasn't adding to the missing, it was resetting the adaptation process. My brain had been slowly getting used to his absence, building a life where he wasn't a regular part of it. Then we'd hang out, and all that adjustment would disappear. I wasn't continuing from where I left off emotionally. I was starting over from the beginning, having to readapt to the distance all over again. Think of it like this. When you haven't seen someone in a while, the missing is like a wound that's starting to scab over. It's still there, still sore, but it's healing in its own slow way. Then you see them, and it's like ripping the scab off. You're not back at zero, you're back at the initial injury, raw and fresh. And now the healing process has to start from the top again. This is why people in long-distance relationships or with friends in other cities sometimes say the goodbyes get harder, not easier. You'd think you'd get used to it, that each separation would sting a little less. But it doesn't, because every time you're together, you're reminded of what the connection actually feels like. And then you have to lose it again. But here's the part that really changes how this feels. The fact that you miss someone more after seeing them doesn't mean you're too attached or that something's wrong with you. It actually means the opposite. It means the connection is real. If you didn't feel worse after seeing them, that would mean being around them didn't matter much. The intensity of the missing is proportional to the depth of the connection. So when you feel that sharp ache after spending time with someone, it's not a problem. It's proof. A lot of people, especially those who've been told they care too much or get too attached, start trying to manage this feeling by limiting contact. They think that if they just see the person less, or keep things more surface level, it won't hurt as much. And sometimes that works in the short term, because you're avoiding reactivation. But it doesn't actually make the missing go away, it just keeps it abstract. You're choosing the dull ache over the sharp one, and that might feel safer, but it also means you're holding the relationship at arm's length to protect yourself. The problem with that strategy is that you end up in this weird limbo where you're not close enough to feel satisfied, but you're not distant enough to move on. You're just stuck in the middle, managing the pain instead of actually experiencing the connection. And over time, that starts to feel worse than the sharp ache ever did. So what do you actually do with this feeling when it comes up? The first thing is to stop treating it like a problem that needs solving. You're not broken for missing someone after you see them. You're not too sensitive. You're not caring wrong. You're just experiencing the reality of being close to someone who isn't always around. And that reality comes with some pain. It's not a bug, it's a feature. The second thing, and this is the part that actually helps, is to stop interpreting the pain as evidence that something's wrong. Most of us have this loop where we feel the ache, then we start questioning everything. Maybe I shouldn't have seen them. Maybe I'm too dependent. Maybe this connection isn't healthy, and all of that just adds layers of suffering on top of the original feeling. The missing itself is clean. It's just an emotional response to separation. But when you start building a narrative around it, that's when it gets heavy. What helped me was reframing the feeling entirely. Instead of thinking, I feel terrible, this must mean something bad, I started thinking, I feel this because what we have matters. That's it. The ache isn't a warning sign. It's not a red flag. It's just the cost of connection when proximity isn't guaranteed. And once I stopped fighting it or trying to make it mean something, it actually got easier to be around him without dreading the aftermath. I started noticing that the intensity would spike right after we'd hang out, but it would level out faster than before, because I wasn't feeding it with all the secondary worry. I'd feel it, let it be what it was, and then it would naturally start to fade again as my brain readjusted. It still wasn't fun, but it stopped feeling like evidence of a problem. There's also something to be said for being honest about it, if the relationship allows for that. I eventually told him, pretty casually, that I always felt kind of hollow after we hung out. Not because the time wasn't good, but because it reminded me how much I missed having him around regularly, and he said he felt the exact same way. That didn't fix the feeling, but it made it less isolating. It was just part of the deal, something we both felt, and didn't need to make dramatic. Another shift that helped was realizing the missing isn't something I need to minimize. For a long time, I thought the goal was to feel it less, to build up some kind of immunity. But that's not really how it works. The connections that matter are the ones that sting when they're not available. That's not something to train yourself out of. If anything, it's worth protecting. There's this idea floating around that if you were really secure or emotionally healthy, you wouldn't feel this way. That you'd be able to see someone, enjoy it, and then move on without the ache. But that's not security. That's detachment. Security is being able to feel the ache without panicking about it. It's knowing that missing someone doesn't mean you're falling apart or doing relationships wrong. It just means you're human and you care about people who aren't always around. One thing I'll say, if you're someone who's been told you care too much, this feeling probably hits you harder than it does other people. And that makes sense because you're more attuned to connection and separation in the first place. But that attunement isn't a weakness. It just means you're wired to value closeness, and when closeness is inconsistent, you feel it. The solution isn't to care less. It's to stop treating caring like a liability. If I were to boil this down to something practical, it's this. When you see someone and then miss them even more afterward, don't try to logic your way out of it. Don't try to minimize it, fix it, or figure out what it means about you. Just let it be the natural response to spending time with someone who matters and then not having them around. The feeling will do its thing and fade on its own, faster if you're not wrestling with it. And if you're in a pattern of avoiding people because you don't want to deal with the aftermath, consider that you might be protecting yourself from something real. The ache is the price of admission. You can refuse to pay it, but then you don't get the connection either. For most people, once they stop treating the pain like a problem, the trade-off starts to feel worth it. The last thing I'll say is this. The people worth missing are the ones who make you feel more alive when they're around, even if it means feeling the absence more sharply when they're not. That aliveness doesn't come for free. It costs something. What it costs is the ache you feel when you're reminded of what you don't get to have all the time. But that ache is also proof that you're not sleepwalking through your relationships. You're actually in them, feeling them, letting them matter. And in a world where most people are trying to optimize their way out of ever feeling uncomfortable, that's not too much. That's real.